And I really always worry on this unit because some of you sit there and then suddenly you're presented with 80 words, 60 of which I asked you on the test, that you've got to keep straight, and some of you just get slammed. So make sure, and I'm going to go down here in a moment and read that list. Make sure you're paying very careful attention because remember your next test is next Friday is the objective test. The following Tuesday is the essay test. I'm not going to give you an essay test on Monday. Okay? You work hard all week. At the weekend, some of you have jobs and so on. I try not to ever give you a test on Monday if I can possibly avoid it. But you do have an essay quest test. I guess it is also an essay quest. An essay test on Tuesday. And on Monday, the 10th, 11th, 12th, we'll just start the new unit. You can't get the two things confused. It's two totally different things. Okay? All right? Everybody understand schedule? You all know where the page numbers are in the blue book and orange book, those of you that use them. My other concern is 2 weeks from this Friday is the end of this quarter. Because the following week we take exams and then go home for Christmas vacation. So Mr. Harold and I stop everything on the Friday the 16th. And let me look down through here. Robert Bills, you still have, Robert, where's
What am I missing?
your personal profile, well, I don't have a grade.
Are you sure
So-
like one day you didn't like misplace something?
Well, that's why you have saved it at home and can print me out another copy.
I don't think I.
Well, then that's your problem.
Don't cry.
Dylan Elmore, Islam test.
Dylan's
Mr.
not with us.
Well, I think he started it.
He's doing the blood drive stuff.
Lindsay Gibbs, Islam test.
I already did it.
Is do I have a test back? I have a test back there that doesn't have the I scratched out, so you're telling me you want to grade it?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It looked to me like it was done, but I thought, well, I better not grade this thing until she gives me permission. Caitlin Gorman. Where's Caitlin?
Right there.
You've started, but it's not done, right? Let's get that thing done as soon as possible. Miss McCollister, you started yours, but it's not done, right?
Give us the person in front of you.
Nikki Moeller, have you started your India-Japan test sometime before I die of old age? Okay. Which might be soon. Heidi Moore.
Not with us.
Not with us. And Derek, you know we got multiple things we need to work on. And Kelsey's not here. And Miss Davis, not here. Well, that makes things quite simple. All right, now, turn to your notes. For example, everything I'm now saying is on a test question or a bonus question with maybe one exception from just yesterday's notes. Okay, I just went through, because right now we're already to 26 test questions and 13 bonuses. 26 and 13. And this is what we covered just yesterday. Okay, now let me go down this list and make sure that everything that you understand. We talked about the Army, medieval Army. Okay, the fact that it had infantry made up of serfs commanded by noblemen as officers. Okay, always spot an officer because he was on a horse. Now it's going to be true clear up to World War I. Knights, which were kind of the jet fighters of their age, or also the tanks of their age, depending on how you're talking about them. And then the castle. And all of this is symbolized in the game of chess. Okay, everybody, that chess is invented, we think about 1200 AD. It's a latter Middle Ages invention. And it's a pretty good approximation of what medieval life was like. Our film we're going to watch will make a big thing about this. And then I have these words, okay? Lance for a knight. The other words for castle are chateau and schloss, okay? Towers, curtain walls, wards, drawbridges, arrow loops, portcullises, murder holes, moats, great halls, ballista, catapult, trebuchet, mining, royal domain, homage, investiture, and primogeniture. And out of that list, approximately 2/3 of those, about 55% of those are test questions. The remaining ones are mostly bones. Okay? Now, do you want me to go down slowly? And if you got a question about one, you stick up your hand. Why don't we do that? Okay? Lance, Chateau, Schloss. Chateau is French, Chateau. Schloss, Schloss.
Read that one again.
Which one? Chateau?
Schloss.
Schloss. German's easy because it sounds. Schloss. Schloss. Okay.
And that's just the other word for
Other
castle.
word, if for example, one of the greatest castles ever constructed in all of Western Europe is Heidelberg Castle in Germany. It's Schloss Heidelberg, Castle Heidelberg. Okay. All right. And the French use the word chateau. Yes.
Can you spell the chateau?
Chateau.
So wait, that's what the French call
A castle.
And the
Germans call it a Schloss, and in English we call it a castle. Okay, all right. Towers, curtain walls, wards. Now, if you got a term you're not comfortable with, just stick up your hand. Drawbridge. Ian, you're supposed to be looking here. No, see.
I don't have any more of those.
Then there's all the more reason to be listening. Drawbridge. Arrow loops. Little slits in the side of a castle, walls of a castle, the sides of the entryway between the gates of a castle, about this wide, about this tall, where you would stand with your bow and arrow or your crossbow, and you could look out and see your target and fire. The chances of the enemy 70 feet away firing an arrow and getting it through that little tiny slot was fairly slim. Okay. Arrow loops, L-O-O-P-S, arrow loops. Marissa.
the curtain wall.
Curtain wall is simply the walls between the towers. This is a curtain wall, this is a curtain wall, this is curtain wall, curtain wall, curtain wall. The big walls stretch between towers.
And the ward.
Ward. A really big castle is divided into it's sort of like a ship, much the same idea. A ship has watertight compartments. The castle was divided into compartments so that if the enemy ever broke into one part of the castle, the soldiers in the castle could retreat to the other parts of the castle for safety. And these were known as wards. The term has survived in the English language long after castles have ceased to exist. The term today, ward, is used in a variety of ways. It's a part of a hospital, for example. It also is how we in America divide our cities into wards, each ward being represented in the city council. I happen to live in a town that has 4 wards, okay? Grove City, that the probably proportion is about true of any town. I think Mount Sterling has 2, okay? Another synonym for them sometimes is precinct. Just depends on how big the town is, okay? Everybody all right on that? Okay, Mr. Jackson's list that I was making up. Portcullis. Everybody okay with the portcullis? Murder hole. Murder holes. In the ceiling, it'd be like if you had, instead of a glass thing, there was a hole in the ceiling and soldiers could come out above. If I'm coming in a tunnel between the gates and the castle, and they could shoot down at me from above. Okay, murder holes. Moat, Great Hall, ballista, catapult, ballista, like a giant arrow. Okay, it works on essentially the same principle as a bow and arrow. Okay, the ballista had a range of about as far as from here to the far side of the tennis courts, and was primarily used. You can use it for a variety of things. If you launched it horizontally at a group of soldiers, you could shish kebab a bunch of them on one. Okay. But the real intent of the machine, I'm sure they were used at that point. If you were desperate enough, the enemy were charging, and you thought, heck, we can't get them, fire that baby. But the real purpose of one was to launch inside a castle or other building that you're attacking, and often you would put rags on the end dipped in some flammable substance and set them on fire, and then fire them inside trying to catch the building on fire. And then the catapults were throwing modest-sized stones, maybe stones of 40 or 50 pounds, okay, used on spring principle. And then the trebuchet, which there's one here. When I first started teaching, nobody had ever heard of a trebuchet. Now it's become, they make them in shop class, and there's, you know, the annual competition here in the United States. It's always at Thanksgiving of the various colleges construct trebuchets, and they compete with each other. They're engineering schools. The reason why is a trebuchet is a real engineering masterpiece, because there's all sorts of stress factors and so on when you suddenly instantaneously launch something that heavy, that far. You have to have it well engineered to work, and it used a counterweight principle, and they could fire sometimes a really big trebuchet could fire maybe a 60 or 70 pound sphere, rock sphere. Okay, and as you can imagine, if a rock sphere like that hit the side of your castle traveling at 100 miles an hour, it did a lot of damage. Even if it didn't puncture, if it hit high enough up on the castle and it shattered, you had all those rock fragments scattering everywhere. You know, you get hit by a rock fragment the size of a big lump of coal in the side of the head or your shoulder or so, it's going to do a lot of physical damage to you. So they were pretty potent weapons. Okay. Mining, and then we got into land, royal domain, homage, investiture, and primogeniture. Okay, and that's where the bell rang yesterday. And we have only 3 more terms to add, and then we're going to take a quick break and then settle down to a new topic. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Then there's 3 last things I want you to write down about castles, and we are all done. Castles and land and feudalism and all that sort of stuff. First of all, as I've been using 2 terms, assuming, because most of the guys in this room know the difference, but I'm not sure if all the ladies do. I'm not trying to be a male chauvinist, but most of you ladies probably don't go around using these things. Does everybody know the difference between a long bow and a crossbow? Long bow and crossbow. You should probably write those terms down. I need some guy to tell me what a crossbow is, okay?
It's a bow that's a gun, but the bow is turned sideways, you shoot the arrow.
So yeah, the bow is like this, not like this. It's like this, curving like this. It has a trigger mechanism much like a gun. Now obviously in the Middle Ages it was considerably more primitive than it is today, okay? And it fires what is called a bolt, which is sort of a cross between an arrowhead and a lump of metal. And it you crank it. In the Middle Ages, you cranked it to wind it up to fire. So you would crank it a couple times, aim the thing, and fire. Okay. Now the advantage is it's a relatively small weapon. It's easy to move around. A very effective weapon at a distance from here to maybe that school bus out there, but that's about as far as one could fire in the Middle Ages with any degree of accuracy. The longbow, as the name suggests, is a bow on steroids. Okay. Longbows, the English Army used a longbow that was 6 foot. Okay, it was taller than most of the soldiers that were using it. Okay, the longbow just is like your standard, when you think of American Indian kind of bow, except it's much bigger. The longbow was a very difficult weapon to use. You could train somebody to use a crossbow fairly quickly. Okay, a longbow, it wasn't the training, obviously you just hold the thing and you fire it, but what took years of practice. English young men were trained from about age 10 on to use longbows, and they had the best longbow weapons in the world, okay, in the latter part of the Middle Ages. At the Battle of Agincourt, which you don't need to know the name, it's a famous battle like Gettysburg, okay, it took place in French and English history. The French army was equipped with crossbows, and the English army was equipped with longbows. And if the battle had been fought at close quarters, the French would have had a tremendous advantage because the longbow was a rather cumbersome weapon to use. But how the English used the longbow at Agincourt was to fire it at long distance, okay? Now you can imagine 5,000 men firing arrows, okay, simultaneously at a block of soldiers, what kind of damage that did. At the Battle of Agincourt, it's estimated that the French lost about 10,000 soldiers and the English lost about 500, okay? Because the battle was fought at long ranges, and the longbow was a very long-range weapon. You could fire it from here, and with a little bit of luck and the wind behind you, take out people in the parking lot up at the old middle school building. Okay, so it was a pretty long-range weapon for the Middle Ages. Okay, so longbows and crossbows. Then the last term is the word fief. F-I-E-F. F-I-E-F. Fief. Does anybody know what a fief is? It's not a weapon. This has to do with land. It's the medieval term for a piece of land. Okay. So when we were talking about the homage and the investiture, the thing that's being transferred is a fief. I don't know whether it was Mr. Summers that I sent to the back of the room to build me a castle back there to defend that entrance to this valley. But if I did, I would say to you, I need you to go, I need you to build a castle, I need you to hold that castle, and to provide you the income for this, I'm giving you a fief of 10,000 acres. Okay? A fief is a piece of land. Medieval term for, and of course, if you hold one, you have a fiefdom. Okay? It's the land that you hold. Now, we have covered everything about feudalism. We've talked about it as a political system, a social system, an economic system, and a military system. Remember, it's local form of agriculture, local form of social structure, local form of government, local form of defense, because national governments were too small and too weak really to do this. They had to give their power, devolve their power out to the local areas to hold on to a piece of turf. When it worked, it worked. As you can imagine, though, if you have a weak central government, there's all sorts of problems of civil wars and other sorts of things. So it had its flaws, but probably there was no other alternative for Western Europe in the Middle Ages. Okay? Is everybody comfortable with feudalism? Okay, before we draw a humongous line across your notes and change gears and go to a totally different subject. Is everybody all right? No such thing as a dumb question. Everybody okay? Why don't we all stretch for about 2 minutes, because this next thing is pretty tough stuff. So kind of stretch, say hello to your neighbors, relax for a moment, read your latest book. What are we reading? Ian. What am I reading? Yeah.
See a picture of the